Rainbow Six Siege has been around for 10 years now, and each update that they've released has helped grow the operator list significantly. Most of these operators have been game-changing for the meta, and they became staples of the game going forward. However, some of them have become completely useless, either because of power creep, too much competition, or just a flawed design from the very get-go. So, in today's video, I went through 10 operators that I think most people in the community would agree are useless or extremely niche, and I'm going to be giving my ideas on how to fix or rework them. Starting off with IQ. IQ is an operator that has suffered for a very long time in the meta, and that's because she's only really useful at dealing with a couple of operators, those being IQ and Echo. The reason why she's only really useful against those two operators is because only those two operators have gadgets that are so difficult to find that with a drone, a lot of times you can miss them. So bringing IQ against them can be really useful. However, the problem with that is if you just spend a lot of time droning and you bring like a Bravo or a Twitch, you can just outright counter those operators and flip their gadgets to your side. And by bringing IQ, the only thing you're getting is the exact location of those gadgets, and sometimes they might be in a position where you can't just shoot them outright. So bringing IQ isn't even 100% useful in the situations where you run up against those operators. I think a way to make IQ way more versatile is to allow her scanner to disable electronics remotely. Basically, the way I would do this is when IQ has her scanner out, she could then hold a button down for maybe a second or two while looking at the gadget she wants to disable through a wall. After she finishes holding the button down, it will then put her scanner on cooldown and completely EMP that gadget for the next 5 seconds. This would allow her to counter things like bandit charges, important chaps like Malusi gadgets and stuff through the wall temporarily so that she could pull off an aggressive play with her team. This could also be useful for countering operators like Vigil or Solace, where you could disable Vigil's gadget through a wall and then use something like a Lion Scan to reveal his position. This would add a lot more depth to IQ's gadget and would make it a lot more interesting. Now, the way you could balance this is by having her scanner go on cooldown after disabling a gadget through a wall for maybe like 30 seconds or so, and then also only allow her to disable 3 gadgets in a round. This would stop her from being completely overpowered and just being able to disable every defender gadget on the map, but it would still allow her to be useful in situations where you need to get rid of an important electronic gadget from the enemy team temporarily. Now, following up IQ, I think another operator that pretty much all of us would agree is in desperate need of some changes is Caveira. And I think the reason why Caveira is in such need of changes is because she basically can just get countered by a simple drone. If the enemy team is smart and they do proper drone work and they have someone watching the flank, Caveira will very rarely be able to pull off anything at all, because all her gadget does is make her footsteps quieter, which doesn't really help her while she's on a roam as much as another operator's gadget would, like Vigil's or Scopos's. So I would suggest buffing Caveira in multiple ways. The first way I would buff her is allow her, while in silent step, to see enemy footprints like Jackal can. I can't remember who exactly suggested this first, but this has been an idea thrown around the community for a very long time, so it's definitely not original to me. However, I think some other things that Ubisoft could do to potentially make her better is maybe make her silent step ability allow her to step through gridlock track stingers and maybe even claymores. Since the whole point around Caveira's silent step is that she's stepping on her tiptoes and she's walking stealthily, we can maybe allow her to walk through claymores and track stingers under the logic that she's moving stealthily and that she's on her tiptoes, meaning that she walks through the claymore lasers. I think this would be a cool idea because it would allow you to flank teams without them being able to hear you flanking them up until right before it's too late. So if they don't have a drone on the flank and you're playing Caveira, you can punish teams for not having one. And then finally, I would also just buff her M12's damage output significantly. Her SMG is really bad, and it's one of the main reasons why no one really picks her. I think if her M12 got a damage buff by maybe 5 points or so, she would definitely be a lot more competitive combined with the other buffs I've already mentioned. Now, moving past Caveira, we have Amaru, and I think Amaru is an interesting operator because she is very useless in ranked. However, people will still really enjoy to use her in casual. However, I think Siege most of the time should try to prioritize making all the operators try to be somewhat viable in ranked. So the way I would suggest reworking Amaru is by giving her a whole new gadget. If you don't know, Z-Man made a Blackbeard rework concept quite a while ago, and the way she went about reworking Blackbeard is by giving him a metal cable that he can launch at the click of a button that would then force defenders to vault over them to get past. I think this would be a great idea for Amaru since it kind of fits the zipline aesthetic. Ubisoft could take this idea and just make it look like a zipline when deployed, and it would be a really cool idea. And then they could also allow Amaru to deploy these ziplines outside to traverse the map really quickly and to also rappel through windows. They can make it work similar to Apex ziplines, where whether you're going up or down, you're still gaining momentum, which would allow you to do things like jump through windows or also go up buildings. I think this would be a really cool way to rework Amaru because it would not only make her useful for cutting off rotations from the enemy team, but it would also allow her to still maintain her fast movement, which is kind of the core idea around her character. Now, next up, we have Alibi, who is an operator that a lot of people love to run in ranked just for her guns. However, by definition, she is pretty useless because her gadget pretty much provides nothing to the team in the way it currently is utilized. So I think Ubisoft can make some changes to make her a lot better. The first change that I would recommend making to Alibi is allowing her to change the stance of her clones by clicking a button on her phone. Basically, Alibi could just look at one of her clones, click a button, and it would change it from standing height, crouch height, or prone height. And this would allow you to set up her clones in a lot more situations, which also would allow you to potentially catch attackers off guard a lot more consistently. Also, I'd like to see her Prismas change their skin based on what skin Alibi is running. Right now, the only way to get a different skin on her Prismas is to equip the Elite skin. However, I think her Prisma should change with her skin no matter what she has equipped. Because with the way it is right now, if you're running any sort of uniform or headgear on Alibi or even weapon skins, you're throwing your games because it's going to make her Gemini stand out a lot more. And it's going to make the attackers realize pretty quickly whether a clone is Alibi or Fate. And what I would recommend doing to make Alibi's Geminis even better would be to make the ping continuous like a Deimos scan when a Gemini is shot by an attacker. This would allow you to basically get temporary wall hacks on an attacker when they shoot a Gemini, which would mean it'd be a lot more punishing, and it would allow you to get a kill a lot more consistently out of this gadget. I think all of that combined would instantly make Alibi a lot more useful, and it would still allow her to keep her gadget and her whole vibe around trickery. Now, following up Alibi, we probably have the most infamous useless operator in Siege, and that is Sens. What I would do to buff Sens would be to make their smoke walls deploy via a drone instead of just by throwing them. Basically, the way this would work is Sens would now get 2 drones that could have 2 smoke walls each. After deploying these drones, Sens would then have to click a button while inside their drone, and after clicking the button, it would then cause a wall of smoke to get deployed wherever that drone drove for the next 5 seconds. This would allow you to be a lot more precise with the way your smoke walls are deployed, but it would also open up the possibility for the defenders to see your drone and shoot it before you're able to deploy the smoke down. Once Sens completely deploys all of the smoke from their drone, or their drone gets shot, that smoke wall will stay on the ground for 20 seconds. The reason why I think this would be better than the current implementation of Sens is because it would allow you to avoid a lot of the problems with Sens right now when it comes to hitboxes. Right now, when you throw a Sens wall into the objective, it'll bounce off of objects that it clearly should not be bouncing off of, and it basically makes it impossible to get real lineups. If you made Sens's gadget a drone instead, it would allow them to more easily make lineups with their walls. And it will also offer a lot more unique ways to play them, because now they would be like Twitch, where they'd have 4 drones, which means you could get more intel out of them, but you'd also be able to use them late round to cover a plant or to help you push into the bomb site. These smoke walls will still function the same way they do now, except they would no longer be impactable, and they would no longer be affected by ADSs due to the fact that they are being deployed via drone. I think all of this combined would make Sens a lot more useful, consistent, and fun to play. And I think Sens is definitely in need of some changes. Another operator that I think many of us will agree needs changes is Tachanka. And that's because whenever you use his fireball launcher, there's a pretty high chance you're just going to die in the process, and you're not going to get any utility out of him. And even if you do manage to get some sort of utility out of him, it's most likely not going to be great because the attackers can very easily just run through his fireballs. So I'd recommend doing an entire rework to the way his fireball launcher works. I would make his fireball launcher only have access to 5 fireballs total. However, I would make these fireballs much larger, and when deployed, they will slowly fill the area all the way up to the ceiling, similar to a way a Capital crossbow bolt works. And I know what you're thinking, this doesn't sound too great. You're only giving him 5 fireballs, and it's just going to be a larger radius. Well, the main reason why I'd recommend doing this is because I think his fireball should now melt any attacker gadgets that get thrown through the fire. This means anything like flashes, smokes, and nades will just be detonated immediately as soon as they get thrown through the fire. The same thing goes for any sort of gadgets like Sens's smoke walls, yin candelas, or anything else. They'll be melted immediately as soon as they get thrown through the fire, and they will not make it to the other side. This would go both ways though. It would also destroy defender gadgets. So like echo drones driving through a fireball's area would also get destroyed, and any nitro cells that were thrown would obviously get destroyed midair as well. This would allow for some very interesting plays late game because it could allow you to not only stop the attackers from entering into the bomb site, but it would also stop them from being able to throw any sort of important utility late round to cover the plant. So if you save all 5 of these fireballs to the end of the round, you can basically guarantee that the attackers can't get into the site. However, to balance this out, I would only make each fireball last about 5 seconds, so that way he wouldn't be able to just outclass Goyo and Smoke off rip. I think this would be a pretty major buff, and I think it's an interesting idea that could be explored by Ubisoft. I understand it would have a little bit of inconsistency between operators like Capitao and Goyo, since you could throw gadgets through those, but not Tachanka's fire. However, I think they could still make it work by having Tachanka's fire clearly be more visible in the air and maybe add some sort of aerial effects while it's active. Now, after Tachanka, we have an operator that many people have been complaining about for a long time, and that is Kali. Kali has been underpowered for a very long time, and that's just because using a sniper in Siege isn't that good. You can already one-shot headshot, so what's the point? Well, I'd recommend doing some major stuff to Kali to make her more viable. Firstly, I'd recommend making her lance's radius much larger. So that way, no matter where her lances are deployed on a wall, they will destroy the bandit batteries or the cage charge as long as they're connected to the wall in some way. I'd also recommend making her lances deal more damage to enemies on the other side of the wall as well. Let's say 25 HP. This will make her a more consistent counter to bandit tricking, since if bandit tries to stay up against the wall and bandit trick through a Kali charge, he'll take significant damage. And then I'd also make her sniper one-shot kill no matter where she hits on the body and no matter what operator she's going up against, with the exception of Rook. I think this would make Kali's sniper more consistent and less frustrating to use. And these buffs to her gadget would also make her more useful and more viable in ranked. Now, next up after Kali, we have Thorn. And the reason why Thorn is weak is just because her traps suck. And the way I'd recommend fixing that is making her traps more similar to Melushi's Banshees. I would make her traps completely bulletproof. However, once an attacker walks into the radius and sets it off, I would then make it reveal its core similar to a Banshee so that it can be shot. Her razor balloons would still be able to be hacked by Brava, detonated with explosives, EMP'd, or countered by Twitch. However, by making them bulletproof initially, it would allow you to place them in a lot more unique positions than you can right now. And it would also force the attackers to waste utility to get rid of them if they want to enter a window, for example, that a razor bloom is on. I would also recommend making the radius at which these razor blooms one-shot kill a whole lot wider so that they can get kills a lot more consistently, and so that the attackers would be more willing to use utility to get rid of them. I think all of these things would make Thorn a whole lot more useful and would allow her to compete with some of the other more strong trap operators. Now, moving past Thorn, we have Nokk, who's a very interesting operator because she's basically entirely based around stealth, which isn't very common in Siege. Her ability allows her to hide from cameras. However, I think the big thing that makes her so weak is the fact that one single set of barbed wire or one single prox alarm can just completely throw Nokk's ability out the window. So what I'd recommend doing for Nokk is make her completely invulnerable to any motion-based gadget. This means that any sort of metal detectors that are on the map she'll be completely invulnerable to as long as she's in her gadget. Prox alarms she'll be completely invulnerable to, and Melushi's Banshee she will not set off while her gadget is active. This would allow her to sneak up staircases a lot more consistently without just one gadget throwing off her entire plan. I'd also allow her to walk through barbed wire without it revealing her on a camera. We could still show the blood being dropped on the ground as she's walking through the barbed wire. However, I don't think that there should be a glitch effect on the camera when she does this. I think these things alone would make Nokk a lot more balanced and more useful in a lot more situations. But on top of that, I'd also give her the MP5 SD with an integral suppressor, since it would fit her stealth aesthetic more, and I'd also just think it'd be a better weapon and a more fitting one for her. Now, moving on past Nokk, we have the final operator, which is Pulse. And I think the reason why Pulse is so unpopular and weak right now is because of the fact that his scanner just really isn't that useful outside of just getting a nitro kill. So the way I'd recommend fixing that is by buffing the range of his scanner significantly so they can use it for far more than just nitro kills, like getting info for your team. Also, I'd allow him with the click of a button while on his scanner to reveal all enemies that are visible on his scanner for a short duration, like Bloodhound from Apex. I think you could allow him to do this twice per round, and it only reveals their location at the time of the scan, meaning that it doesn't give his team a live update of the location of that attacker. All it does is just basically give a red ping to the entire team. I think this would be a great way to shift Pulse from an operator who's just designed for getting a nitro kill and that's it, to an operator that can actually support his team and provide more information. I'd also recommend giving him a secondary shotgun to help him set up the bomb site and to make his loadout more in line with Castle. I think if Ubisoft did these three things, Pulse would immediately become a whole lot more useful and more versatile. Anyways, that wraps up today's video. Let me know your thoughts on my suggested changes and what you would do to these operators in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't miss the next upload. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you all enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.